other way.
So how's the class so far? Is it good? Adequate?
Yeah.
Okay, fair
Push it
enough.
away, all right.
I'll try to
Yeah,
maintain
I'm
that,
sitting right
that it'll still be adequate after today. I'm Hank Whittenberg, account manager at Contemporary Chrysler Dodge Jeep and Ram. This is Max Thorp. He's in charge of our internet sales department. As we go through, if you have questions, just let me know. I have a little bit of an outline to try to keep you on track. I want to make sure that we get to questions that you might have as we come up, and try to give you a little background, go through the actual process, things to look for on test drives, things to make sure that you know ahead of time before you go into the dealership, and things not to do, if that's okay. Make sense? Who here wants to get a car in a year or two? You want to get another one? Okay, he buys cars, it's a habit of his. So most people, so how many, just for fun, how many of you have jobs? Nice. Okay, so for everybody who raised their hand to the first question and didn't to the second, I would suggest getting a job, because it will definitely help, okay? I have 3 kids, 23, 20, and 18. That may not seem relevant, except for the fact that I've been through this process with my kids relatively recently. So part of getting a first vehicle is learning how to manipulate your parents. Okay, right? And I'm sure that many of you do that on a regular basis, but there's some really useful ways of doing that. Getting a job is a huge way to manipulate your parents. There's another one. Offering to do the dishes, like once in a while, without being told to do it. I'm telling you, you do that and your parents will help you out more when it comes time to buy a car and stuff. And that's just the reality of it. Anyway, Contemporary Chrysler Dodge Jeep and Ram has been around for 30 years. We're a small town dealership, and that's important to understand, because the way that large dealerships treat customers and potential customers is different than the way small dealerships do. With the large dealerships, the high volume dealerships, I'm just going to speak plainly, if that's okay. They can afford to make people angry. They can afford to do high pressure sales tactics and things like that, because they know they're going to they have a large amount of traffic through. With small town dealerships, and whether it's Contemporary or another small town dealership, and there are plenty, the salespeople are going to tend to spend more time with you, answer more questions, and be less high pressure. It's just kind of the way it works. So think about where you end up wanting to buy a car from. Our lines, Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram, nice variety for new vehicles. The Dart is a great starter vehicle for people. And on the new car side of things, we have both new and used cars on our lot. A lot of very good used cars as well. Most manufacturers have a good range of types of vehicles. And they're all. While I might prefer ours, just because we have them, the truth is that there are good Hondas, there are good Fords, there are good Nissans, right? There's some good anyway, so there are plenty of good vehicles out there, and most of the manufacturers have a nice range of vehicles to do what it is that you need to do. Of the salespeople on the floor at our dealership, 4 out of 5 of us have Darts, or their spouse has a new Dodge Dart. Again, it's a good starter vehicle, and I like mine. Got it as a little commuter. I live over at Derry, work in Milford, and so it's a nice little commuter vehicle. It's in the same class as a Civic, but it smokes the Civic in real numbers and things. So anyway, and I have here in my notes a warning about side of the road car dealers. So you can, if you go by the road, anybody ever gone by the road and you see this what looks like a really nice car for not a whole lot of money, you need to be careful about buying vehicles like that. Unless you're a mechanic, unless you really understand cars well, I would encourage you to steer away from those types of dealerships. Mostly because the cars that we get in on trade that we don't think are good enough to have our sticker on the back of them, we sell to a wholesaler, and the wholesaler sells it to those dealerships. So if there's a car on our used lot, we know that it's going to be a good vehicle for folks, because we can't afford. We've been around too long, and we have both new and used. We can't afford to put a rack, so to speak, of a vehicle out on our used lot and have it fall apart, because that will hurt our reputation. And the side of the road types of dealerships, their approach is different than ours. All of our used vehicles go through our shop, 128 point inspection. Is that 128? Okay.
Yeah.
He corrected me on that earlier. And they get all tidied up for folks. We only keep the good ones. The other thing, the other way that people, those side of the road dealerships get their vehicles is through the auctions. Okay? So imagine for a moment that we're at an auction, and all of you are car dealers, right? Whoever buys this vehicle, say a Nissan Altima, is somebody who's willing to pay more than everyone else in the room. So everyone else in the room knew something that this other, I'm just picking, I don't know if it's you or you, I'll just pick up you. It's easy. So you paid $100 more than anyone else in the room. So she's going to have to charge more than anyone else in the room thought that they were going to be able to get for that vehicle. So it can be really hit or miss with those side of the road dealers. And then Craigslist can be even more challenging to get a good vehicle. Now I'm going to tease Max for a minute here, because he's bought a number of vehicles via Craigslist. I can't afford to buy vehicles on Craigslist because I don't know vehicles well enough. I have bought one, and it ended up being more expensive because there was something wrong with it that I didn't realize, and it cost me a lot to fix it. So the initial price might look great, but at the end of the day, it didn't work out well anyway. So buyer beware on Craigslist, okay? Buyer beware. So please don't, I mean, just as long as you understand what you're getting into. If you're a mechanic, or your parents are mechanics or something, and you can work on them and make them great, God bless you, go for it and do it. But if you're like me, I'm not a mechanic, and I really can't work on vehicles, it hasn't worked out well for me, just as a heads up. Before you come into the dealership, things to do, you got to set your budget. Don't just come in just off the street and having no idea of what you can spend, whether it's a cash payment or whether it's a monthly payment. It's important to understand what you're going to be able to spend, and I'm sure my guess is you guys have probably gone over that a fair bit. Depending on the dealership, again, you might want to be a little bit more cautious at the large dealerships, but at the small dealerships, it's good to disclose what your budget is, because that'll automatically rule some vehicles in and rule some vehicles out for us as salespeople. Pardon me. And do your math ahead of time. Okay? So, in other words, and I'm going to say this jokingly, but I also mean it. Don't be an idiot. Okay? What I mean by that is, don't come in and say, I want to buy a brand new Wrangler Rubicon, and I want my payment to be $350 a month. Why? Because the Wrangler Rubicon's a $37,000 vehicle, and unless you have about $17,000 or $18,000 to put down, your payment's not going to be $350 a month. It's going to be $608 or $612 a month. All right. So don't come in and say, "Oh, I want this vehicle," realizing that there's no way to attain that. Does that make sense? Because otherwise, you're just disappointed. You do the test drive. Oh, I love the vehicle. Everything is great. Oh, this is awesome. Let's write it up. Oh, I can't afford but half of that. It just wastes everybody's time. Research and think of the features that are most important to you ahead of time. What are the deal breakers? Is it a deal breaker for you to not have leather, okay, or heated seats, or is it a deal breaker? Is your primary goal to get four wheels that go at the same time, and to just get you around for basic transportation? I would also strongly suggest that you give yourself about 2 hours in a dealership. Okay? The reason is, if you really like the vehicle that you're looking at, it'll give you plenty of time to go over all the details, so you really understand what the deal is going to be. Time to pick out the vehicle, test drive it, do a good inspection of it, do all that stuff, and you can pretty much get things pretty well tidied up in about 2 hours. Don't come in and expect to buy a car in 30 minutes or even an hour. It's not like buying a pack of gum. Okay? And also, don't feel like you have to buy a vehicle on your first visit. Okay? Most of our customers do, but don't feel like you have to, because it's okay to think about stuff, to test drive and see if you like it, or to compare it to a different vehicle. That's okay. Okay, now, large dealership ain't gonna tell you that, but we are, because that's the reality of things. All right, so I'm gonna pass these out. Pass those around. This is what we use to try to understand what a customer needs and what vehicle is going to work for them. And as soon as it gets around, I'll start to go through it. And I've got some sample numbers inside it for you, but we'll look at those numbers in a few minutes. So we start by just getting a little bit of information. Have you been here before? Why are you looking? And then we'd like to know how you heard about us. We spend ad money just like everyone else, and we kind of want to know how we got a customer or a potential customer into the building, and if we're spending those advertising dollars well. Whether you're on a new or pre-owned vehicle, car, truck, SUV, van, or other. And is it going to be used for personal or for business? Thanks. How many drivers, how many passengers? How many passengers is important, because if you write down 6 or 7 passengers, I know right off the bat that you're in a handful of vehicles that we have. Okay, does that make sense? All right, my guess is not many of you are looking for minivans for yourselves, right? Nobody's looking for a minivan? Okay. But you have one, yes, well, sometimes it works out that way. Yeah, I drove a Grand Caravan for about 8 years. We put about 230,000 miles on it before I had to take it out back and shoot it.
Well, my dad likes cars, got a minivan at an auction. It's like good, not gonna fall apart on me, and he likes because it's like better to drive bigger cars, that way it's like it's not
Right.
much damage
To you personally,
to you,
yeah.
the car, yeah.
Yeah, still get plenty of damage in the car, that's right.
Yeah.
And they're good, they can be, the four-wheel drives can handle relatively well in the snow adequately, and you can get around well. So that's right. You'll see these 2 boxes under options of must-haves and like to have. That's part of the decide ahead of time. What are the deal breakers? What do you absolutely have to have that you want in the car? If you absolutely, you can't live without a moonroof or a sunroof. We write that down. If you can't live without navigation or leather or whatever it is. If you're, for instance, there are a couple of vehicles like the Patriot, which is a small SUV, and the Wrangler, which you can get manual transmission. Of course, some of the Dodges you can get manual as well. And you can get those roll-up windows and manual locks. So if you know that if you want to are interested in a Wrangler, it's important for us to know, do you want the power windows and power doors, because those are options for us. Most of the vehicles, though, have electric windows and door locks. Does that make sense? Because it doesn't. It's happened to me where we've gone over stuff, we've gone on the test drive with a customer, and they come back and say, "Oh, yeah, I forgot to mention, I have to have a vehicle with a backup camera." And I had a woman tell me this just about 2 days ago. She said, because I don't park very well and I tend to bump into things in back. Okay, yes, you definitely need a backup camera to try to minimize that. So that's important. Your current vehicle, we like to get information about that. Many times so when it's time for you to upgrade out of your minivan, we want to know what it is because you may be trading that in. Does that make sense? Because if you're going to trade it in, we need to be able to put a number on it and appraise that for you. So we get information about that. And we also get, importantly, we get information what you liked most about that car and what you didn't like about it. Because that will help us fit you into another vehicle based on what your needs are. What are some of the vehicles that people are looking at? What types of?
Pickup trucks.
Pickup trucks, yeah, Rams are awesome. 2 years in a row, Motor Trend Truck of the Year from the 1500s. Fantastic pickup trucks. Crew cab or do you want just a standard cab?
So like with either the.
How many doors? Do you want the 4 doors or?
4 or 2, either one.
Either one?
Yeah.
Nice. What are some other types of vehicles people are looking for?
I could have my dream car, Volkswagen Passat.
Volkswagen Passat, okay. Good. Those are good little cars. My brother has a Passat wagon. He's getting ready to sell it. He lives out in Colorado, so it wouldn't be a good sale for him. Anything else?
A Hellcat. Yeah.
Zach, that will be your first
I'm
car.
not worthy. Yes, Hellcat would be awesome. No question, we had the person in from Dodge, from Chrysler headquarters today doing the training. And you know, we spent like 10 minutes on the Hellcat. We're like, why are we even doing this? We already have the deposit on the only Hellcat we're possibly going to get allocated. And it's an impressive machine.
I had a guy from California contact me and say, I've emailed every dealership in the country. Does anybody have a Hellcat left? Nope, they're all gone. They're not even out yet, they're all gone.
Yep, not even out yet. So there's a funny video. Well, it's a good video, I think. Jay Leno with Jay's Garage on YouTube, and he goes over the Hellcat. It's pretty good. Then, if you look down here on goals, what's the one thing you want to do today? If you're just gathering information, tell the salesperson that, because that way he or she's not going to have the expectation of we're going to try to really negotiate a deal. If you're ready, you've done your research and you're ready to try to work a deal out, let them know that, because it'll make things easier than the basic information. So once we get to this stage, then as a salesperson, I'm going to try to pick out a vehicle, obviously with your input too. Because you can say, oh, I'm looking at a Cherokee, I'm looking at a Dart, I'm looking at a 1500. Maybe you like the Eco Diesel or something, I don't know. Whatever it is, we're going to go and get the keys for a vehicle that most closely matches what it is that you're looking for. And then, whether it's new or used, do the same thing. And then take it on a test drive. So you want to check the vehicle out thoroughly. You want to check the tread depth on the tires, especially on new vehicles. You don't check that because they're going to be new. But on used vehicles, you want to check that. And then, because you need to think about how soon am I going to have to replace the tires. Right. So if the tread depth is shallow, it's not going to be too far in the future that you're going to have to replace the tires, and that's going to be, depending on the vehicle, $400 to $1,000, depending on what size tires they are, if you're replacing all four. All right, does that make sense? Okay. Checking the brakes. If it has disc brakes and you can feel through the wheel, if there's a big edge to the disc brakes, you can just feel up on it. Then you know that the brakes are partially worn and they may need to be replaced relatively soon. So that's important. Other things to look for. What else might you look for if you're looking at used cars?
Rust.
Rust. So where are you going to look for rust? I'll get to you in a second.
In the chassis, underneath.
Right, so on the frame underneath.
Yeah.
Yep. So don't be afraid to get down on the ground and look. I mean, actually, on the ground and look. To see what kind of rust. Where else might you look for rust?
Like if it's on like the sides of the doors or on there.
Right.
My dad has a truck that we got back in like 2003, and it has a little bit of rust like on the bottom of by the door.
Right.
Like just kind of on the bottom there.
Right, and even before it shows on the outside, it's important to open the door and feel underneath the door, because that's where it'll start. And then once it starts, it grows quickly. On the base, right where the door is, the rocker panels, okay? In the wheel wells, those are other areas where the body can rust. Because if it's bad, once it gets there and you can poke through it, it doesn't pass inspection.
Any sharp edges won't pass inspection, so if there's rust in the bottom of the fender and it's sharp, you're going to have to fix that. Or stay away if you're looking to buy it.
Can you talk about ways to tell, besides looking at a report, but to see if it's been involved in an accident before? What body failure measurements?
Right. Well, it'll really be on the auto check or the Carfax report if it's been there. If it's been reported through that, and any significant damage is going to go to a reputable. Should go to a reputable shop and do that. Big pieces of Bondo, which are basically like if there are body panels that are mostly that plastic Bondo material, that's a good sign that there's been a big problem.
Another thing is you check the gaps on either side of the car. So the car is supposed to be symmetrical all the way down. So if the gap on the left side of the hood is bigger than the gap on the right side of the hood, it's likely the car was hit on the front end and the hood got moved over and then it was repaired. Another thing is under the trunk where the spare tire is, if you see any creasing on the metal where the spare tire is, it probably got rear-ended and then pulled back out, which is something you want to completely stay away from.
Make sense? You held your hand up earlier. What was the question I asked? Oh, what do you look for in a?
Yeah, maybe like if something got spilled in the interior, because if there's something like in the interior, it might be like sticky, and if you set something on that, it might get stuff all over stuff you put in the vehicle.
Right, and maybe something that's not easily cleaned off, like I don't know, whatever it is. Or we had a car come in. It was a Honda Odyssey. Did you check it?
I don't think so.
The Honda Odyssey, it had like 6,000 miles on it. So the guy never drove it. I think it was a guy. I didn't take it in. So what we believe is that he used this vehicle as his smoking room. He went out into the vehicle and the car literally smelled like an ashtray. Now I used to smoke. I smoked about 25 years ago. Yes, I am that old. And it was repulsive. You open the door and you stick your head in it, it was just wicked. Just nasty. So those are remnants of the prior owner. In whatever manner, you definitely want to check for in the vehicle itself. Yeah.
You also want to make sure its mileage isn't too high or something you have a car.
Right, you definitely check the mileage and compare that with the auto check report of the Carfax to make sure it's consistent. Because if the mileages don't line up, then maybe the odometer's been replaced or something like that, and that's a huge red flag. That's a huge red flag. And then you get into a vehicle that's known as a TMU, total miles unknown, and that plummets the value of a vehicle. If you can't, if the dealer, or whoever it is, if they can't verify the mileage on a vehicle, then our recommendation would be to stay away from it or give very, very little for it. Right. So, does that make sense? What did I miss?
I know you guys have been looking online for cars. A couple of the good sites are cars.com, Auto Trader, Craigslist, obviously, if you're looking for a cheaper car. Auto Buy Tell is a good one that you probably don't know about. There's lots of good sites out there. It's best to always call the dealership ahead of time. Make sure the car you're looking at is still there, because I've driven a couple hours to find out that the car that I was looking at online sold 2 weeks ago, and that's a bad day. And I mean, don't be afraid to go to a different car if you're looking at one online and you show up and they don't have it, or if you want to check something else out. Obviously, if you're looking for something really specific, look online first, pick out the one you like, and then go there. And
but definitely call ahead of time. We've had that situation happen with us. What happens is the way the websites work is we have a database that the autos are entered into for used or new, and every so often those other websites sweep our data. We push the information up to it, but it doesn't happen instantaneously. It just happens every few days, depending on the website. So we'll actually have sold a vehicle, but it'll stay on Auto Trader for a week or two, even though it's already off our website and it's already off our database. So it takes time for those to update. So definitely call. I've had people come all the way down from Maine to look at a particular Wrangler, the 01 Wrangler, and we sold it like a week ago, and they drove 2.5 hours.
And then they get mad because they saw it online and they think it's your fault. And
so they use the phone, right? So the devices are for something other than just texting. Okay? My kids don't really know that. So when you also check the vehicle for door dings and little rust spots, because they definitely grow. Like around the tail lights and around the headlights, sometimes you can get little chips there. And if they start to rust, that rust will accelerate over time. So just because there's a little speck of rust here or there doesn't mean totally avoid the vehicle, because that can be sanded and you can put touch-up paint around it to keep it from spreading. But if you don't address it, then the car goes away due to corrosion much more quickly. And then drive it, or have your parents drive it, depending on the vehicle and your age. So when you're driving it, it's useful to obviously on a day like today or in the wintertime, it's hard to check to see if the air conditioning is working. But it's important to know if the air conditioning blows cold, because we do have hot days up here in the summertime, and air conditioning is very useful. Drive it a little bit over some bumps here or there with the window open and listen. And you want to listen for some rattles and ball joints and things like that. If you hear some bad rattling, then you know that those are going to be some relatively expensive, could be expensive repairs in the future. So you should keep that in mind. So driving around a little bit with the window open is useful. Keep in mind though, when you drive a vehicle, if it's been sitting on the lot for a long time, especially if it sits on pavement, that the tires can get little flat spots to them. So if the vehicle hasn't moved much, you might feel a little vibration in it, and usually that works its way out if you have a long enough test drive. So definitely you want to drive the vehicle a little bit. The other thing to look for, and it's easier if the lot is a pavement lot than if it's a grass lot, look for puddles under the vehicle. Okay, so when you're getting under to look for corrosion, look and see if you see a big puddle of oil or a big puddle of something under it, it's useful to understand what that is. Water is not a big deal because condensation and things drip, so feel it. And if it feels oily or really slippery, then you know that there's a problem. Maybe a transmission leak, maybe an oil leak, whatever it is. It's important to figure that out. When you're driving it, obviously you want to check the brakes really well. One way to check the alignment is to drive it for a while and keep your hands very close to the wheel, but just take them off a little bit and see how the car drifts, if it drifts one way or the other. And do keep in mind though that most roads have a crown to them so that the water runs off to the edge. So as you're driving down the road, if it drifts to the outside edge a little bit, that's going to be fine, probably the crown of the road doing that. But you'll get an idea if the vehicle pulls or not, one way or the other, and that's going to be an alignment issue, and that can be expensive to fix. The other thing to do is to test the brakes, and go ahead and again, with your hands right next to the wheel, but very, just off. If you hit the brakes pretty good braking, if it pulls hard to one side or the other, there's a brake issue that'll have to be addressed. All right, and that may be a vehicle to avoid, or maybe an additional allowance they'll give you for the cost it'll take to repair that part of the vehicle. Does that make sense? Got it good? All right. And then as you're driving it, think about how much you like the car, whether you like it. You may hate it. You may say, I thought this was online, this got good reviews, but I'm just not comfortable. Or I don't like how this works or that works, or there's no plug-in for my iPod or whatever. Whatever it is, and most newer vehicles now have Bluetooth connection. If you have a smartphone, you can Bluetooth right to it, and it's nice because you can play music or whatever right that way, and hands-free. And then we ask folks, after we're done with the test drive, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 you never drive it again, 10 you got to have it in your driveway, where is it? And if it's 7, if it's below 7, we're on the wrong vehicle. So that gives us an idea as to whether you like the vehicle or not. But you should be thinking about that too as you're driving it, not just, this drives well or not. Kind of picture yourself driving it on a daily basis or whatever. Then we'll look at the numbers here in a minute. In your mind, and this is just as rough numbers, think of $25 to $30 per thousand financed if you're going to finance it. Now that can be a little high, but if your credit is not great, then it'll be about where it is. And if your credit's really good, then ultimately the number that you get for payments is going to be lower, and that's going to be good news. So it's better on the front end going in, thinking it's going to cost you a little bit more per thousand to finance a vehicle than less, because it's not great to fall in love with the vehicle and then realize you can't afford it. You know what I mean? Because then it's like window shopping. I don't know why people like to window shop. I can't stand it, because if I want to buy something, I'm going to go someplace and buy it instead of just looking at stuff. All right, so inside here, I have some sample numbers for you. Are there any questions so far?
Do you do this to every client coming in?
Well, we actually don't give it to the customer. We fill it out. Yeah. It helps us keep track too, because then we know how they purchased their last vehicle. Did they finance it? Did they lease it? How many miles per year? If your miles per year is really low, a lease might be a good option. The other thing that what might make a lease a good option for you is that maybe your parents don't really want to keep co-signing on stuff for you. And a lease is a way to build up some credit, but have that period of time be limited to either 24 months or 36 months, and then you can get out of the vehicle if you want it or buy it out at the end of the lease term. So a lease is an option, especially if you don't drive a lot of miles. For some folks, depending on the vehicle, they can lease very well, even if it's at high miles. So it depends on the vehicle. It can work out well. So here on number, I have the pages numbered. Number one, there's a 2011 Jeep Liberty Sport. We actually just sold this one after I ran these off. But this just gives you an idea. Cost of the vehicle, the fees that get charged to everyone. Some dealers, by the way, we've seen this in the past. Beware of the administrative fees, okay, on the line here, because some dealers will advertise a really low price on a vehicle. We had this happen, and someone went down to Mass and they saw, oh, the same vehicle is priced $1,500 less than your vehicle, identical vehicle, same color, same packages, everything on a Grand Cherokee. They get down there, and the administrative fees were $16.99. So, oh, well, you don't have to charge that because I'm a New Hampshire customer, so you don't have to do title or plates or any of that stuff. They said, no, we charge that fee no matter what. So it turns out their vehicle was not less than ours because they got it on the back end on the administrative fees. So be aware of that. This is the same thing we charge every customer. So
That's something actually on my first car that I bought through a bank. The dealership actually didn't tell me about the fees until after I'd already signed the paperwork. So they kind of threw an extra $300 on the end, just kind of like, oh, by the way, you got to pay this too. So keep an eye out for even the small dealerships will do that. Definitely.
that's why we use these.